Hello, today we're going to talk Chapter 2, Section 3, the Spanish and Native Americans. In our previous lecture we talked about how Spain had claimed a new empire. Now we're going to talk about how they expanded upon it. The very first thing the Spanish did was set up an effective colonial government. They did this by splitting the empire into two viceroyalties, known as New Spain and Peru. A viceroyalty is an area, and a viceroy is one who rules in the name of the king. The Spanish built a vast system of roads to improve the colonial infrastructure. The two main reasons why they built roads were to help Spain control the colonies by allowing soldiers to move quickly from place to place, also to improve the Spanish economy by moving materials such as gold and silver to the coast, which would then be sent to Spain. The Spanish were able to then hold great positions of power over the Native Americans. Here's a map of the holdings of Spain and Portugal. Note the Treaty of Tordesillas, which really gives Spain the advantage in holding much of North and South America. In order to maintain power in the Spanish colonies, the Spanish created a system where the Spanish-born were the most powerful, followed by the people of Spanish descent who were born in the colonies. They were also known as Creoles. Under the Creoles were the mestizos, who were people that were mixed Spanish and Native American. And lastly, the Native Americans and enslaved Africans filled out the bottom of the social pyramid. Next, we're going to learn about how the colonies were economically productive, and in doing so, we're going to learn two Spanish words. The first is encomiendas. This is a grant received by Spanish government officials to allow the use of Native American slave labor. And the other is haciendas. This is a large estate or a farm designed to produce food for the colony. These haciendas and encomiendas put much of the power in the hands of the few. And if you can guess from the previous slide, the few are more likely the Spanish-born or Creole. Native Americans were also forced to work on a different location known as a plantation. These plantations were designed to grow specific cash crops for export, and the number one plantation were sugar plantations. Next, we're going to talk about the role of the Catholic Church in the Spanish colonies. The very first thing the church wanted to do was to set up missions in the Spanish colony. And the goal was to convert Native Americans to Christianity. And these missions offered Native Americans a variety of things. The first was to create a better food supply for the Native American population, to protect against enemies, and to learn skills like reading, writing, and carpentry. But unfortunately, many of the Native Americans were mistreated also at the missionaries because they were worked like slaves, and soon rebellions began. Many of the Spanish treated Native Americans very poorly. One person, however, by the name of Bartolomé de las Casas, was a little bit different. Now, he came to the Americas as part of a conquest of Cuba, and for his part in the conquest of Cuba, he received an encomienda, or in other words, those claims for Native Americans to work for him. But he was also a Catholic priest, and he faced this moral dilemma. How can a person serve God and enslave Native Americans at the same time? So de las Casas started writing and petitioning to the king, and a lot of his writings became known as what is called the Black Legend. This legend depicted the Spanish as cruel, greedy, and self-serving, and the Native Americans they conquered as peace-loving and innocent. And this black legend gained strength around Europe when the writings of de las Casas were widely published in French and Dutch and English translations. Between his descriptions of the maltreatment of Indians by the Spanish and the condemnation of his own people, de las Casas influenced the way many Europeans viewed Spain's role in the colonizations of Americas. This convinced the king at the time to issue what is known as the New Laws in 1542. These laws called for the gradual freeings of enslaved Native Americans. Ironically, these laws were reversed as many Spanish started to protest against that, and the king reversed them. The last thing we're going to talk about in this chapter section is the Columbian Exchange. This exchange was the movement of all living things between the hemispheres. We're talking about the Eastern Hemisphere, which is Europe and Africa and parts of Asia, and the Western Hemisphere, which is North and South America. This resulted in a big spread of disease. We're talking an estimated 20 million dead from things like malaria to smallpox. Many plants and animals were brought to and from the Americas, and really ultimately this brings the world closer together. Here we have a visual depiction of the Columbian Exchange, and just look at all the different resources coming from Europe, Asia, and Africa to the Americas, and all the resources going back to Europe. This cycle really created competition among European nations to want to get to the Americas. And in the next chapter section, we're going to talk about one such nation, England, and their attempts to colonize North America. But until then, we'll talk to you later.